This is Kenyel Brown. He was supposed to be helping law enforcement. Instead, he became one of the most dangerous killers Detroit has seen in years. He's a man whose name you've probably never even heard of, but he's a career criminal with a long rap sheet, including violence, drugs, and DUIs. He should have been in prison, and he was for a short while, until the justice system decided he'd be more useful as a snitch and let him out to roam the streets, a decision that would age like milk. But let's rewind a bit to start from the beginning. While Brown was supposed to be gathering intel on gangs and drugs, he was instead racking up probation violations and continuing to commit crimes as if he were above the law. Each arrest would result in a little more than a slap on the wrist and an early release. It was only when the bodies started to mount up that authorities realized they may have made a mistake, and even then, they realized it was far too late. This wild, disturbing, and honestly infuriating case exposes just how messy things can get when the justice system tries to play both sides, and when a violent criminal plays them back. This is the informant who turned into a serial killer. Like most violent criminals, Kenyel Brown wasn't born evil. He grew up in the small city of River Rouge in Wayne County, Michigan, and was part of a large family with several brothers and sisters. Brown was also a gifted athlete during high school, particularly when it came to basketball. Even the brother of one of his alleged victims, who grew up with Brown, couldn't deny his talent, going so far as to call him a star and the best. The problem was basketball wasn't the only thing that Kenyel Brown was addicted to. Brown's drug addiction is said to have caused a dramatic shift in his personality, and he soon started getting in trouble because of it. In August of 1997 at age 18, Brown was arrested after attacking someone with a weapon. He served a year at the Wayne County Jail. Then shortly after his release, he was arrested again in March of 1998 for carrying a weapon and resisting arrest. He pled guilty and was given a conditional suspended sentence of 4 years. By 1999, he clearly hadn't learned his lesson, and Brown was arrested for a third time after trying to sell someone a legal taser. Instead of being sent back to prison, Brown struck a deal with investigators and agreed to testify against other inmates in exchange for the charges being dropped and him being allowed to walk free. This would be his first taste of being an informant, and would start a worrying trend as his criminal activities continued to go unpunished. Keeping up his yearly arrest record, Brown was caught for possessing and attempting to sell drugs in September of 2000. Did he get any prison time then? Of course not. After providing details of other crimes being committed in the area, he was let go, again. It didn't take long for Brown to find himself in handcuffs though. It was a new year, but not a new Kenyel Brown. In February of 2001, he caused a car accident which severely injured one person and took the life of another. This time his crimes were serious enough that they could not just be swept under the rug. Brown tried to run from the scene, but was arrested and charged with a string of offenses, including second-degree murder, resisting arrest, intentionally inflicting moderate injury resulting in death, driving without a license, and illegal weapons possession. Ultimately, the charge of second-degree murder was dropped, but as a habitual offender, Brown was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the other charges. He was paroled in 2010, and there were signs that his long stint in prison had possibly reformed him. 3 years went by without an incident. Then in 2014, he was back at it. Brown was arrested in Detroit for illegal possession of weapons. This might have been the nail in his criminal coffin, as under the Armed Career Criminal Act, he was sentenced to life in prison. However, the Supreme Court deemed the sentence to be unconstitutional, and after pleading guilty, Brown was given 21 years behind bars with a trial period of just 2 years. During this time, despite Brown claiming to suffer from a mental disorder and calling himself by his dead brother's name, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, aka the ATF, decided Brown would be the perfect candidate to become an informant. If you're new to the channel, please hit subscribe. I appreciate the support. Back to the video, boys. And what do you know? After serving the minimum of 2 years, Brown was a free man once more, even after violating his parole and being sent back to prison 3 months later. The Bureau stepped in to have him released again because of his status as an informant. Between May 2017 and October of 2019, Kenyel Brown breached his parole conditions several times. He was arrested for drunk driving, tested positive for drugs on multiple occasions, and his only punishment was being sent to a drug treatment clinic for 21 days, after which just 2 weeks later, he was arrested for drunk driving again. He was eventually brought in front of a judge on October 29, 2019 to answer for his repeated parole violations. Judge Bernard Freeman said that he was aware of Brown's, quote, dangerousness, but incredibly he decided to give Brown yet another break, telling him you've got to stop doing this. Hilariously, though not really, the same day after he walked out of court, Brown was rewarded with a meeting with the DEA and Detroit Police Task Force, not as a suspect but as an informant. Chief James Craig of the Detroit Police Department later called this appointment magical, being sarcastic of course, saying that they never would have used Brown as an informant had they known about his multiple probation violations. Surely they had to have known about his violations before hiring him as an informant. In the words of Keith Corbett, a former federal prosecutor, they had to have known he was involved in a lot of criminal activity in order to have any reason to expect that he would be a decent informant. Everybody knew he was a bad guy. The worst part is the Detroit DEA task force paid Brown $150 for information about drugs and gangs in the city, and now his killing spree begins. Still to this day, the motive is unclear, but here we go. On January 30th, 2020, Brown had returned to his hometown of River Rouge and visited some childhood friends, 48-year-old Dorian Patterson and his brother Gerald, at an address on Beechwood Street. Patterson was quoted saying, "A few months ago he popped up out of nowhere and started hanging around my house. He and my brother would sit in the living room drinking beer. There didn't seem to be any problems. That changed on January 30th. They were later joined by two other people, 52-year-old Kimberly Green and 44-year-old Clifton Smith. Gerald left for work while others drank alcohol and partied later into the evening. At some point, there was an altercation and things turned violent. Brown, who had a gun on him, no shock there, fatally shot his childhood friend, Dorian Patterson, as well as Kimberly Green. He also severely wounded Clifton Smith, shooting him 23 times, but miraculously, Smith managed to get away and flag down a passing police car. Smith would later recover from his injuries. When Gerald returned home, he was confronted by a crime scene. The police asked him who was wearing an army fatigue jacket, identified by Smith as the shooter, and Gerald knew it was Kenyel. Tragically, Kimberly Green's daughter, Brianna Green, said her mother was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was visiting friends and had no connection to Brown. Unfortunately, Kenyel Brown had already fled the scene by the time officers got there. As it turns out, Dorian Patterson and Kimberly Green were not his first victims, nor would they be his last. Police were quickly able to determine that Brown was responsible for another fatal shooting that happened just across the street less than a month prior. 31-year-old Lauren Harrington had been shot multiple times, the reason for which remains unclear, but it could have been a robbery gone wrong. With Brown now on the run, his next victim was 49-year-old Garces Woodyard, whom Brown shot and killed on February 18, 2020 while trying to rob him in Highland Park. 2 days later, Brown made his way to Detroit. Whilst there, he was captured on CCTV visiting 41-year-old Amir Thaxton. Thaxton worked at a clothing store, and although he was said to be familiar with Kenyel Brown, that didn't stop the latter from killing him. Brown shot Thaxton inside the store before escaping with the money, valuables, and Thaxton's caravan. Growing increasingly desperate and violent, Brown attempted to steal a car in Detroit on February 22, 2020, and shot 36-year-old Eugene Jennings. Jennings was a father of 5, described by his family as a selfless man who had held his family together. He also had no connection to Brown. Despite being hunted by the U.S. Marshal Service Detroit Fugitive Apprehension Team, the Firearms and Explosive Detroit Field Division, and the ATF, the same ATF that once hired Brown as an informant, Brown managed to evade capture until February 24, 2020. It was only when Brown wandered into an adult bookstore in Oak Park, Michigan, and was noticed by the janitor that net began to tighten. Bro couldn't resist the urge to look at some nudie mags on the run for multiple murders. Bizarrely, Brown had been kicked out of the same bookstore before. The janitor noticed him when he returned because he'd seen the news reports. Brown overheard the employees talking about whether it was really him, and he ran out of the store. The janitor called 911, and police swooped in.
Detroit Police Dispatch calling because we may have a wanted felon in your guys' area. He's wanted for like 5 homicides. Name is, yeah.
What do you have?
He, well, we got a call saying that a person saw him, and now they're looking for him in backyards.
There's a man in my backyard, and I believe outside police is looking for him. He's jumping the gate now.
Officers spotted Brown jumping over garden fences, and a local resident reported hearing 3 popping sounds. 40-year-old Kenyel Brown was found slumped on the ground against a fence, covered in blood. He had a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the right side of his head. The reports state he only pulled the trigger once. Medics failed to find a pulse, but were able to bring Brown back to life. He never regained consciousness and died in the hospital 4 days later. Kenyel's reign of terror had finally come to an end. He had claimed 6 lives, not including his own, or the person he killed in a car accident. When the news broke of his role as an informant and the numerous chances he had been given by authorities, people were rightly outraged. Clifton Smith, the man who was shot 23 times by Brown and survived, filed a federal lawsuit accusing 2 unnamed Detroit police officers of recklessly enlisting the aid of a confidential informant who went on a shooting spree that resulted in injuries and the deaths of 6 other victims. The Detroit News even ran an article saying 6 had to die to get a couple of drug dealers? ? It's shocking how such a violent criminal was able to get away with committing crimes for so long and be unleashed to the public. Yet it happened, and outside of Michigan, not many people have even heard of this guy. Have you heard of Kenyel Brown before this video? Let me know. Comment down below if you want me to make more videos like this. Hit subscribe. Love you boys. Peace out.